Today I want to give a talk about the struggle of Mormons during the 1840s. Freedom of religion is a huge part of the U.S. Constitution and should be given to all Americans. But the Mormons in the 1840s did not receive this and were forced to leave their communities and seek refuge in the Utah region via the Mormon Trail. Also, the arguments for why Mormons provided economic strength for local communities and migrated west. Lastly, I will discuss arguments for why the Mormons were being persecuted and having their religious rights taken away. For example, mobs forced Mormons out of Nauvoo, the extermination order of 1838 by Governor Boggs. This paper will show how Mormons provided economic opportunities for the general communities and how others felt that they were a social threat. It will illustrate, how religious freedoms were tested and how Mormons had to migrate west to escape persecutions. The Mormon religion was introduced in America in the 1830s. Mormons were never liked by the local non-Mormons and faced persecution socially and politically all across the Midwest and East Coast. This is a common start for any major group in the United States. There's a lot of anti-Semitism towards any new organization. As the religion grew and more people started becoming Mormon, they began a very successful economically and were great farmers. These are the two major keys for success in a town in the 1840s. They often controlled voting ballots in every town they had a presence in. They fundamentally took over communities across the Midwest due to the fact that they came in large numbers. This caused a lot of animosity towards Mormons, and they became a disruptive group than a contribute to society. The breakdown in Nauvoo is an example. From this hostility, the Mormons needed to find a location where they were threatened by the government and local communities and to maintain a prosperous religion. From researching new locations in the West, Utah was a perfect territory that provided solidarity and gave them the ability to establish new municipalities that were non-existent. Mormons first started using the Oregon Trail as a route to escape their persecutions. They started many Mormon communities on the trail, and by the end of the 18th century, they had over 500 settlements. That was a quote from Gibson. When the Mormons left Nauvoo, it was in the middle of winter and the Mississippi River was frozen. So this is a quote: "The great severity of the weather and the difficulty of crossing the river during many days of running ice all combined to a delay in our departure. Though for several days the bridge of ice across Mississippi greatly facilitated the crossing." End quote. That's from Matson. Once the Oregon Trail was established, the Mormons broke off from that trail and started their own to be more isolated from the persecution and Midwest influences. That was a quote from Kimball. Missouri was a main location and region where the Mormons lived before they were driven out to Nauvoo, Illinois. In Missouri, Joseph Smith, a modern-day prophet, tried to start a holy city in Independence, where they wanted to build a temple on the land that was given to them for farming. Once they had made their presence known in Missouri, many Mormons flocked to their location to finding more persecution, but the opposite was found. It got to the point in which Governor Boggs had made an executive order in 1838 to begin an extermination of Mormons, that they had been treated as enemies and driven out to maintain peace within the state. Boggs stated in October 1838, quote, "The Mormons must be treated as enemies and must be exterminated or driven from the state if necessary for the public good." That was a quote. This was referred to as the Execution Order number 44. There were many deaths in association with this order, and it drove out most Mormons from the Missouri to Illinois. It gave militias and people an excuse to expel the Mormons from the land. Mormons were then forced to go to Illinois, which leads them to the horrible Mormon persecution in the town of Nauvoo. Mormonism in the 1840s was a thriving religion that was located in Missouri and in the Illinois regions. In Iowa, the town of Nauvoo in Illinois, there was about 12,000 Mormons living there, and during the 1840s, and they were very successful economically, and would come to communities in large numbers and systematically own the local communities. That was a quote from Hartley. Nauvoo was created to be a place where the children, quote, where the children of the last kingdom could come together to praise the Lord, end quote, Bennett. Mormons would have the tradesmen live in the middle of town, and farmers would live on the outsides where they could have a best chance for a fertile season. Mormons could farm anything and anywhere and would work on the hard soils. They were seen as a threat, were putting people out of business. Joseph Smith was a political prisoner under Executive Order 44 issued by Governor Boggs in 1838, and he escaped from Missouri and fled to Nauvoo for refuge, but was soon captured and put in prison there. With the locals there was a lot of anti-Mormon Semitism towards them, and there was a lot of built-up aggression, and the communities took the opportunity to make an example of Joseph Smith. While he was in prison, a mob formed in the town and tore Joseph Smith out of his cell, and he was murdered by the mob. This was a big shock to the Mormon community and sent them moving west towards Nauvoo. On the Mormon Trail towards Utah, this wasn't the first time Mormons had been driven out of community, and it certainly wasn't the last. Mormons faced persecution throughout the East Coast and the Midwest. The American Constitution states the citizens of the United States are able to practice any religion we want. This is what makes the U.S. so free and are the building blocks of U.S. society today. But due to the terrible religious persecutions the Mormons faced during the 1830s and 1840s, they could never settle and express their religion fully, so they had to move westward along the Mormon Trail. Most of America saw them as a threat to society because they were so good economically. They would take over towns, control the voting areas. Mormons didn't mean any harm by what they did. They just happened to be more successful and more determined than other Americans. And because of that, they were persecuted beyond belief. This is an example of how religious freedoms need to be protected by the U.S. government and respected by the people. Thank you for listening to my argumentative speech.
Good job.